That's the second time you brought up the trade war, the economic war with the United States. Is that, do you think that's underappreciated in the press here? That I mean, they've been talking about it, but I sort of glaze over when I listen to it because I don't really have any way to quantify or understand it. Do you think it's a bigger deal than most of us realize?
I'm starting to think it's a huge deal. I mean, you kind of listen to the speech that Vice President Pence gave yesterday. I mean, he really took the idea of the trade conflict and put it in a much bigger context. I mean, this isn't just about steel jobs and trade balancing anymore. He sort of brought everything from sort of human rights and Taiwan and, the technology issue and sort of lumped it all together and kind of started to sort of redefine US relationship with China. I think it was that there was a story yesterday that Bloomberg ran. I'm not sure whether you saw it about how
Absolutely, I posted it on Facebook and it got more play than anything else. The computer chip, the manufacturing chip.
I think this is potentially a game changer. I mean, this all of a sudden puts supply chain issues in stark security terms. So if originally the idea of the trade war, kind of a fringe view, was that the ultimate goal was to, bifurcate global supply chains, to sort of split, the US supply chain sort of off from China, I think increasingly that could actually be the direction that we're heading in. And if so, that has huge ramifications both for the cost of manufacturers in the United States, the economic opportunity for the rest of the emerging world, the potential for growth and investment in China. I think that really has the potential to start reallocating resources globally.
The quote that I was looking for when I was mentioning Pence's speech, because we were referring to the same one, or maybe it wasn't a speech, I think it was actually a quote he gave to the Hoover Institute. And it had to do with election meddling. And he said that what the Chinese are doing to the United States right now, quote, pales in comparison to what China is doing. What the Russians are doing, pales in comparison to what China is doing. And I was bringing that up from what point of view? First of all, I know from my research in cyber war that the Chinese are actually far more adroit, at least from my readings, than the Russians are. But I thought in terms of a political strategy, I could see it sort of all coming together. As I've been watching and listening to this administration and their signaling, I think they're far more politically astute than American journalists understand. And I think that the incorporation of cyber war, election meddling, and basically acknowledging that there's election meddling happening in the United States, but then transferring that to the Chinese and pointing it in that direction, I think it's all part of a general strategy to put the focus on China. And I think, just that alone, that more increasingly belligerent rhetoric with the Chinese, and also the seemingly, again, I'm not at the administration, maybe there's logic to this. There very well could be. I don't mean to suggest there isn't, but this seemingly schizophrenic relationship with our allies, with the government's allies, and its supposed enemies. This, you could see it nowhere better than in South Korea, North Korea, and China, right? It's a confusing time, and I think all that uncertainty has failed to materialize in equities. It's failed to materialize in the U.S. stock market, and the reality is, at least in the West, we've had a pretty good time the last 10 years. A lot of things have been going well for us, and there are a lot of black swans on the horizon, whether it's a market downturn, whether it's a hurricane flying up the East Coast, another, more catastrophic storm than Sandy, increasing levels of turbulence in our climate, et cetera. I think it's... I'll let you get the last note in here, Dinny. I know you're on a tight timeline. You got to get to the airport.
No, to be honest, Demetri, I don't have much more to add than that. I think it's, I think we're very much entering uncharted territory at the moment, and I think, the way, not even just the trade relationship, but I think the way that China and the US relate to each other and engage with each other, where it be in education and students, whether it be cross-border investment in technology or anything else, or whether it just be the trade relationship, or even how the two countries see each other from just a security standpoint. It feels like all of those things are in flux at the moment, and how that plays out is going to have an impact not just on the Chinese economy, but certainly it will have an impact on the US side of things as well.